Alright guys, I went and saw The Master, the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and quite frankly, this is probably one of the hardest non-written reviews I have to do, because Paul Thomas Anderson, if you guys are familiar with his work, uh, it his most recent film was There Will Be Blood, and he's also done movies like Punch Drunk Love and Boogie Nights. And he's one hell of a good director. He's one hell of a talented director. And I really do think that this movie is superbly directed. My friend and my business partner, Zach Eshwalm, he believes, and actually he's not too far off the mark that from what I can gather from my own personal opinions, is that pretty much Paul Thomas Anderson is pretty much the best director living. It's not necessarily saying that his movies are our favorites, but he definitely is one of the best directors working right now. And it's really fascinating to watch this movie. All right, just break it down by all the pieces. All right, first, acting. This is the first film Joaquin Phoenix has been in. I'm not sure exactly what movie he was in right before he did the whole crap with I'm Still Here. But this was a great role for him. He played this character so well. And it's hard to like this character. It's really hard to like this character. As a matter of fact, part of me, you feel sorry for his character, but at the same time, he's so self-destructive and he implodes upon himself in such viciousness. It's actually really shocking to see. Amy Adams does an amazing job, and also Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's hard for me to explain each of these roles, trying not to give away anything in the movie. But then again, at the same time, since it's a Paul Thomas Anderson film, it's not like it can really give that much away, especially when it comes down to this. Alright, I will, if you guys are watching this review and, you haven't seen The Master yet, stop, because I'm gonna, give it through. There's not much to it, though. Basically what The Master is mirroring is the birth of Scientology and focusing on the character of L. Ron Hubbard. He's not called, it's not called that in this, it's called The Cause in The Master. And Philip Seymour Hoffman plays the L. Ron Hubbard character. He comes across as this eccentric, very self-aware person and whatnot. You can tell if you know the history of L. Ron Hubbard, and also how all of the subtext about Dianetics that it was basically he was making it up as he went along, and they actually make that a point. One of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, one of his sons. The character's sons literally tells Joaquin Phoenix in a scene that he's making it up as he goes along, and you see how Joaquin Phoenix reacts. He's all right. Joaquin Phoenix plays this really disgruntled, this really mentally ill naval officer. Well, not officer, but he was in the Navy during World War II, and he is an insane drunk. And I'm talking about drunk to the absolute extreme, to a point of which, it's amazing to see, this guy do what he does. In one of the opening scenes, he drinks gasoline from a torpedo. When his character gets to have a job at, a shopping mall or something like that, and he takes photography, he's a photographer, and he takes, candid photographs of people they're setting up for family photos. And one scene, he literally mixes together a whole bunch of photographic chemicals and whatnot for processing, and he turns that into a booze. And it's just really astonishing to see how this stuff goes. I mean, you see him put in paint thinner and all sorts of stuff. It's really hard to watch that. But these are fantastic casting choices. I can't imagine better characters playing these roles, especially Amy Adams, because she plays the wife of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, and my God, like, you know, you can see how the fervor that she has, like the conviction to the message that she has more conviction to this cause than Hoffman's character does, and it just really is, like, you know, the characters are really, really vivid. I will say, though, moving on to the cinematography, the whole thing was shot in 70mm film, which looks fucking fantastic. But at the same time, the movie, as opposed to There Will Be Blood, which is shot with extreme deep focus, like almost the entire movie, almost every single almost every single shot in There Will Be Blood is either a really deep shot, really wide, or the medium. They never get really close. This movie is shot with extremely shallow focus. It's shot extremely shallow. There's a lot of scenes that take place where it's close-ups on the people's faces and everything else is blurred out. And I normally don't have too much of a problem when it comes down to shallow focus, but if an entire movie is shot using shallow focus, Zach put it really well, like, it's a headache. I mean, it makes your head throb a little bit after a while. And this movie's a long sit. It's about 2.5 hours. About 2 hours and 45 minutes, give or take. I'm not sure exactly. But I mean, it's not that it doesn't look good. Like, every single shot of this movie could be a picture. It could, you know, it's a cinematographer's wet dream, I'd imagine so. But at the same time, too much shallow focus, I'm guessing just from my own perspective, because my favorite, you know, director is Stanley Kubrick, who's all about, you know, deep focus, master shots, you know, all this stuff about the long takes. This one has a lot of great long takes. There's actually 2 scenes which I think are very, very potent. The first scene where Hoffman is interviewing Phoenix for the first time, and he's setting down a recorder, and he's asking him these questions over and over again. He's like, you know, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? And he goes through all of these processes, and then it gets to a point where he's telling Phoenix not to blink while he's answering the next questions, and if you do blink, we go back to the very beginning. And this shot is held on Joaquin Phoenix for probably, I'm saying, like a good 3-4 minutes, and it's just one continuous shot, and it's really intense. And also, like, you can see him starting to cry, because it's really starting to get into something really deep and really personal with him. And for the entirety of the beginning of the movie, he's very shut off, very reserved, and very, very apathetic to the rest of the world. And it's really powerful to see him the way that he plays the scene. And that's one of the few times in the movie where I thought that the close-up and the shallow depth of field really worked to the movie's advantage. There's another scene later on in the film where both Hoffman and Phoenix are arrested, and they're in opposite cells of each other. Hoffman is arrested because his character has conned an organization out of money, and he's under arrest for a civil suit. Phoenix tries to fight back against the police officers from taking him, then he ends up getting arrested and thrown into the jail cell next to him, and you just see Phoenix flipping the fuck out. He starts banging his head against one of the bunk beds. He shatters the toilet in the cell, and he just kicks it to pieces. And then he just starts screaming at Hoffman's character, and Hoffman starts yelling back at him, you know, and they just keep saying "fuck you" to each other because, you know, they're past words at that point, and Hoffman just starts saying, it's like, no one else likes you but me. No one else likes you but me. And it's just really a really strong scene. Great performances, really well shot. I personally think, given the actual angles that the scene was shot with, I believe that they probably shot that scene or at least the wide shot of the scene, they shot it in one take. Not just the fact that I feel that, you know, they would have to constantly keep replacing the broken porcelain and all that jazz, but at the same time, the fervor, you could tell that this was, like, at least, like, a one-take scene, if Paul Thomas Anderson wasn't Kubricking this movie. But there were a couple shots in the movie that were long, that used a good depth of field. They used the 70mm to a good advantage. But really, it was only to establish setting. It really wasn't used throughout the rest of the scene. It was in a scene where Hoffman and Phoenix are riding motorcycles. They're riding a motorcycle back and forth. Like, you know, pick a point on the horizon and you just drive as fast as you can straight at it. And they really use a great cinematography in that scene. But at the same time, you know, it's just the shallow focus kind of just makes your head throb a little bit. Onto the screenplay. Paul Thomas Anderson wrote the screenplay as well as directing this, and it's one hell of a script. I never was bored throughout this movie. It meandered at small pieces here and there and whatnot, but I never was really bored by it. I was always enthralled when things got really intense between Phoenix and Hoffman, and it was a very compelling movie. Now, my overall opinion of it, I did like it, but I would definitely need to watch this a second, maybe even possibly a third time before I give you like a good, give any of a good analysis of it. I remember when I first watched There Will Be Blood, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I wasn't a fan of the music. I wasn't a fan of the pacing and all that kind of stuff. And then later, I ended up picking up a copy of it from FYE or Blockbuster or something like that. And I ended up watching it again. And then I ended up realizing how well shot, how well acted, how well positioned, how framed, how well written, and also the music itself. Like, I am not a Radiohead fan. I've never really been a big fan of Radiohead at all. I'm not saying that their music is bad, it just doesn't appeal to me. But when I found out that Radiohead did the score to There Will Be Blood, I was interested. I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. It is actually a really decent score. I'm still not exactly the biggest fan of it, but at the same time, it really is a score that is to be, it's very impressive. And that's the same way it is with this movie. For The Master, I'm not sure exactly who did the original score, but the funny thing is, I think probably about 2/3 of this movie has an underscore to it, which sometimes can work and sometimes it doesn't. This one, I'm not sure whether or not it does. As I said, I have to watch it again, but from an off-the-cuff remark about the music, it did work. It did keep me involved in the movie. It kept me invested. And I really have to say, like, you know, it was a movie that I never was really bored in. I saw it at the Charles Theater in Baltimore, and I saw it last night, so it was opening, it wasn't opening night, it was the day after opening night for the Charles, if I'm not mistaken. The place was packed, and this was a 5:30 showing, and I wasn't prepared for that. That was actually, I was expecting, like, handful of like hardcore moviegoers to go into the movie because, you know, basically this is like almost a 3-hour long art film. It really is. But the place was packed and you had a lot of excitement. You had a lot of apprehension in the very beginning of the movie, but as the movie went on, not only did the mood like completely, you know, become suppressed, several people did walk out of the movie after a while, and actually, there was this really old couple that walked out of the movie like 5 minutes before the credits started rolling at the end. I'm like, you really couldn't last an extra 5 minutes? Sure, it wasn't exact. I guess, like, considering of the nudity and the sex involved in this movie, I guess it made them uncomfortable. I definitely think that probably a good half of that crowd couldn't get out of there quick enough after that movie ended. And the reactions I had with it was like, you know, people were either, they didn't know what to make of it. When Zach and I were walking out, and there was a woman who was probably in her early 40s, and she walked up to us, she's like, what did you think of the movie? I'd like a young person's opinion on it. And I almost started cracking up, because I'm like, it's like, you know, it's just, this is a quintessential Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And we told her, I was like, this is the same guy who did There Will Be Blood. She's like, oh, well, I guess I'll never see that movie. In my mind, I'm like, oh, well, I guess you really didn't like it. And this is not an easy movie to like. I definitely think that it's definitely something that, I'm not saying it's something that, you'll love it or hate it. It's a movie that kind of leaves you in a state of ambivalence at the end of it, because it kind of ends and you're not exactly sure what you're supposed to take out of it. I like movies like that. I like movies that are void of a clear-cut or any catharsis that makes you really think and ponder about the themes expressed in the movie. Like certain movies, I guess you can say, like Larry Clark's movie Kids. I guess you could, just Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void or Irreversible, like movies that leave you in a state of kind of limbo at the end. It's like, what exactly am I supposed to make of this? I think those are really, really fascinating films. And this is a really fascinating movie, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I'm behind it as much as I was expecting to when I started seeing the trailers for The Master coming out. And I guess in a way I'm in the same boat with the audience that kind of were disenfranchised from the film. But at the same time, I did like it. I did like the movie. I did think it was well directed, very well acted, well scripted, well shot, even though, as I said, the shallow focus got to me after a while. But it's a really potent sit. It is a really potent sit. I was actually expecting it to be longer than it was because Paul Thomas Anderson, the movies that he's done, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I don't think he's ever done like a short film or an average length film. It's usually always over 2 hours. I think Boogie Nights was like 3 hours and 15 minutes. I could be wrong with that. It might be a different movie. I just remember hearing that. But, he makes really long movies, but he makes movies that are really, really interesting and really, it keeps your attention the entire time. Is it a movie I recommend? Only to people who really can just, forget themselves throughout this movie. You have to be engrossed in this movie, or else you're just going to be very aware of your surroundings. There are parts of the movie that are incredibly funny. There are parts of this movie that are incredibly sad. There are definitely parts of this movie that are very disturbing, but not in ways that, it's not, disturbing in ways like, I would say, like a Serbian film, or, just even to a point like, Bad Lieutenant, either one. It's not really that disturbing. It's disturbing to see how Phoenix's character's mind is just warped in the way it is, and there's the mechanisms that he uses in order to cope with life. And it's also interesting to see how Hoffman you can see that his character is struggling with himself to, in a way, I guess you could say, maintain the illusion that all these people are just involved with. And there's a later part in the movie where he releases a second book, and he starts changing the dogma, the rhetoric of it. It's all about going into past lives. Going into past lives, remembering past lives, because your souls are apparently 1 trillion years in the making, and all this other stuff. Basically, the tenets of Scientology, of Dianetics. And, how, your frustrations and whatnot have been implanted in you and all that jazz. But you can see how Hoffman, when one of the minor characters, I know the actress, I can't name her off the top of my head, so I apologize, but when he releases the second book and he starts changing the rhetoric, instead of saying, recall what you know, it's just imagine what you know. It's letting the door open to a lot more people, because if you simply just imagine something and you're convinced that it's accurate, anything can, you can be convinced of anything. There was an earlier scene in which there was a skeptic of his work who interrupted him when he was talking to some society people in New York, and he was basically, calling him out. And then it got to a point where Hoffman just couldn't talk anymore, and then he just called him a pig fuck. And you can see how his rhetoric just kind of fell apart. Now, to be fair to the character in that scene, the character that was questioning him, that was being a skeptic to him, he was being really fucking rude. He was, you could have just waited until he was done his little spiel before you started in, but he just constantly kept saying, excuse me, like, once every, 2 or 3 seconds, until finally Hoffman turned around and acknowledged him, and then he just straight out attacked him. And that's fine. I mean, that's how, defending your beliefs are. And he called him out as you're not defending your beliefs with logic. I have skepticism, but at the same time, Hoffman's character does make a decent point. Is your mind is already made up, so why even bother asking? And that kind of goes back to the whole matter of people debating strong topics in the first place. If people debate politics or religion, if you debate communism versus capitalism, or atheism versus Christianity, or something like that. There are people who are dead set in their ways that, regardless of what you say, might not actually take any effect whatsoever. So it really does do that push and pull. So it's not really about cults. It's not really about just cults or just Scientology. It's about religion in general. It's about logic in general, which really makes it a really potent theme for a movie. And the funny thing is, Hoffman character, I can't remember his first name, I believe his last name is Dode in the movie, but he is actually not referred to as the Master except for twice in the movie. The first time that he's referred to as the Master, he isn't referred to it in probably, I think, almost halfway through the movie, I would imagine. And the last time he's mentioned is in one of the very last scenes that he's called the Master. And you see that there's only also a couple times where his name is actually mentioned, and that was the one time that his full name was actually mentioned was when he was being arrested. So it's almost like he's this anonymous entity that just kind of, he's almost like a godlike figure to these people. And it's just really amazing to see how it goes. I definitely recommend it to cinephiles like me, the people who are just all about watching movies. I hope to see in the next few days, if I'm able to, I hope to see the documentary Samsara by the filmmakers who made the documentary Baraka. I really hope to see that because apparently it's one of the most amazingly shot films in the last decade. So I really hope to get to watching that movie. But The Master is definitely one hell of an interesting sit. It's enthralling. It's incredibly well made. Am I in love with it? As I said, I have to watch it again, but am I in love with it at this point? No, I'm definitely not. It's my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie that I've seen so far is Boogie Nights, and I actually do love that movie to death. It's just got so much fervor to it. But at the same time, this movie itself, I'm not sure. The presentation is very interesting, and it's very different. It's very disjointed, especially in the very beginning. It's fragmenting things, and then it kind of jumps back to certain things at the end. So there's something I know that I'm missing. I know for a fact that I am missing something. And I apologize for that because, Paul Thomas Anderson, he has a very dense perspective. I'm not saying that he is thick in the head or something like that. It's just he expertly crafts this vision of his to a point where he's trying to push the audience in a certain way. And he definitely pushes you. You can feel yourself being led, very much like the attitude of the movie. You are being led on this journey. You're following the direction that he's going through, just very much like Phoenix is following Hoffman, the direction that he's leading him throughout the movie. And definitely watch this film if you do not mind art films, if you do not mind long sits. But at the same time, if you're someone who likes to passively watch movies, which I have no problem with. I mean, I'm not a passive viewer. I haven't been for a long time, ever since I got into making film. But, if you're a passive viewer, this is definitely not a sit for you. Also, if you're uncomfortable with sexuality at all, this is definitely not safe for you. I mean, it's not an overtly sexual film, but there are some parts where, like, you know, if you're not okay with this stuff, it'll make you feel really uncomfortable. Several people did walk out during those parts of the screening because of that. But, you know, it's definitely one hell of a watch. I hope eventually to get a review out for Compliance whenever I get around to seeing it, because I really want to watch it. I've heard a lot of great things about it, and I really want to sit down. I'll try to get to Benji's again to get another Benji's Night review in, a few more movies off the cuff. Hopefully I'll have David Short reviewing the movies with me at that point. But yeah, stick around, and hopefully we'll have some new stuff besides reviews coming out pretty soon. Thanks.